First time?
Hello everyone, the 3.3 version 5 beta just ended with some nerfs to Cipher, and well, people weren't too happy about it, which I would understand if she was actually meaningfully nerfed, but she wasn't, and is stronger than when she started. So when I see people complaining about her version 5 status, I'm like, what are you on about? This will also be the second time this has happened. The first was with Jiaoqiu's beta, and okay, fool you once, whatever, but twice? Really guys? Was it that believable when her numbers were quote-unquote cut in half, which they weren't really? Anyway, instead of explaining the entire kit like what I normally do, I want to focus more on the core parts and the changes, and what they actually entail for a Cipher, and not just the red number bad. Firstly, for those who don't want to watch the whole video, I'll be using a tier list to explain her position. Cipher is an amplifier sub-DPS hybrid, but unlike most sub-DPSs who scales on their own stats, for Cipher, it'll primarily be the recorded damage of the team. Regardless, she would easily be in the 0.5 tier for both sub-DPS and also amplifier, and unironically, the top of the 0.5 amplifier characters. Yeah, better than Jiaoqiu in the generalist damage amping category, but of course losing out to him in certain scenarios for an Acheron team, but like not even by a lot. So yes, she's absolutely a top tier character, but here's what people don't really get. While the 0.5 characters in the main DPS and sustained category are pretty close to their tier 0 counterparts, for the sub DPS and amplifiers, no, there is a gap, like a noticeable gap in the power. And it's not like the amplifiers in tier 0.5 or 1 are weak, it's just that those guys in tier 0 in reality are in like tier -1, okay? Like they're super damn strong. Now, let's take a look at my revised tier list. As you may have noticed, Hyacinth is a bit high up there. Though this video is not about her, we do have some time to spare. But basically, she belongs in her own tier. That duo of her and Ika easily outdamages probably every sub DPS in the game and many DPSs, buffs the current top tier HP scalers like Casters and Mighty, and is probably Acheron's and Herta's best sustain. Not much else needs to be said. Also, I moved like all the tier 1 DPSs up because they are literally on par with Acheron and Rappa, if not better. But because it's been AoE MOCs, Acheron and Rappa are doing very well. Now, another reason why I want to make the tier list, besides me liking tier list, is to show why I don't like a particular common criticism or complaint about Cipher. The criticism being that she's just good and not the best in slot in many teams. And I'm like, well duh. Those 4 supports up top are literally everyone's best in slot support. It's no wonder other characters like Jiaoqiu don't really compete. Even if Cipher kept her version for multipliers, she's not touching those 4 due to her own multipliers. By the way, it's because they never mattered in the first place, like a certain Foxian. Okay, before moving on to the drama and doom posting, let's go over the context, starting with version 1 Cipher. When Cipher released, she started with a 100 cost 240% attack ult, a 400% attack follow-up once every ult, and a 30% defense shred. I am, by the way, ignoring her damage recording capabilities for now, as that will have its own separate section. Just note that it's a major part of her kit. Version 2 rolls around and changes her ult cost from 100 to 130, whilst nerfing the follow multiplier from 400 to 250%. But giving it 5 energy per follow-up. This alone got some people upset, which makes sense, but version 2 I would consider was not a complete version, as you'll soon see. Also, during this time, her Trace 3 was completely changed to a 40% vulnerability and 100 follow-up crit damage. So let's talk about the version 2 changes real quick. The ult cost change was absolutely negligible for most teams, as you would be saving her ult fairly often anyway, meaning you'd just be wasting energy a lot of the time. Now, to actually buff an ult like hers, you would have wanted to increase the energy cost to say like 150 while making her core damage more efficiently. This way you wouldn't be wasting energy whilst getting more damage. Now, moving to the follow multiplier, this was nerfed by 37%, but instead we got 100 crit damage. So let's compare these two situations, one pre and post nerf. Overall, as you can see, we lost around 20% damage assuming you didn't have any crit damage substats or main stats. But remember Trace 3? Yeah, that's gonna influence the results. A 30% defense shred is equal to a 19% damage increase, while a 40% vulnerability is a 40% damage increase. This change was freaking huge, but I guess people just glossed over it. Sure, she lost around 20% personal damage, but this was actually completely made up and then some for her whole team because of the vulnerability. But what if you stack defense shred to put it in its favor? Well, let's assume you either had an E0 S1 Fei Xiao or a Pearl's Pela, giving around a 54% defense shred. Jumping from 54 to 84 is still only a 29% damage increase, while the 40% vulnerability is still a 40% damage increase. Version 2, as you could tell, was a giga buff. Moving on to version 3, we had another big buff, but again, I like to see it as the completed version of version 2, where now instead of only one follow-up per ult, it's now one follow-up per turn, which is great for Fei Xiao and Aggron teams. This of course means more energy, and the version 2 changes now make more sense. To account for the ult change from version 2, they've also adjusted the first two Eidolons, as shown on screen. Looking pretty good so far, no? Now, version 4 made it even better and did three things. 1. It buffed the ult multiplier from 240 to 600, the follow multiplier from 250 to 300, and the E1 now gave 200% attack instead of 80. So let's go through all of it, starting with the ult. I've heard holy insane 600% multiplier, this is amazing. The question is, was it really? Well, assuming a solo cipher and using these stats, not accounting for relic sets because I kind of forgot, so it would actually be a bit higher, but regardless, we would have went from around 18k damage to 45k in ult. The follow-up, however, went from around 25k to 30k. Again, really nice, but this is nowhere as OP as people made version 4 out to be. However, that 200% attack E1 was absolutely ridiculous, but nobody batted an eye. For reference, this is equivalent to 300 crit damage. Using the same stats as prior, this is a 100% damage increase. And for reference, most E6s give a 30 to 40% damage increase. And that's only half of the Eidolon, and not even the reason why I should be pulling for it. You should be pulling it to record the damage more efficiently. So yes, this would have been the most broken Eidolon in the game, but people acted like this should have unironically been in the game. Moving on to the final version, aka when the Doom posting and meme started, they simply reverted the multipliers back to the version 3 state, and a slight follow multiplier nerf. People started crashing out, saying they nerfed and gutted her. But no, that's literally not what happened, as she simply got reverted to a prior state. And this is what the beta is for, to test things. Version 4 was never hers to begin with. As for the follow-up, we would have went from around 19k to 15 if you think that's important. But okay, let's say she did keep that 600% multiplier, and in an Aggron team was dealing like 70k ults. Well, because of how her damage recording works, her ults, if you were saving like 500 to 1000 charge, you were dealing like 500k to a million damage in ult. We lost around 40k damage for an ult that should be dealing a few 100,000 damage. But I guess that's a game-breaking nerf, right? Another point I've heard is that because of the multiplier changes, that means she now can't be played in a hypercarry team anymore. The thing is, she still can. In a Tribi, Robin, and Hyacinth comp, she was never the main source of damage in the first place, as it would have been mostly Hyacinth and Tribi. Cypher simply came in with the backloaded damage due to recording a percent of the damage that Hyacinth and Tribi did, where again, her multipliers in the end didn't really matter. A great example would be the gameplay in the back with Pela against the Flame Reaver in the MOC 12. As you may have noticed earlier, Pela is not a majority of the damage, the same way that Cypher's personal damage was never going to be the main star of the show. Now, instead of a Gallagher dealing like no damage at all, imagine Hyacinth and Ika dealing like 300 to 500k a turn, adding Tribi's follow-up and Robin's personal damage, and then Cypher recording all of that and dealing it out. Using this as an example, this is also why I believe Cypher would age so well and have such high damage ceiling. This is because her damage scales with her team's damage, which is amazing. What happens when 4.0 rolls around and the DPS is there to deal even more damage? Well, Cipher's damage also gets blown to the moon. Well, now you know why I believe what everyone else was saying was absolutely ridiculous, because 1, she was overall buffed, and 2, her own multipliers never mattered. This is basically a 1-to-1 for what happened to a certain pink-haired Foxen that was Omega Doom posted. But I guess this is just a nihility thing, which kinda makes sense. Hopefully you understand a bit more about what happened to Cipher and don't go around doom posting. I do, however, predict that she's gonna be the most flexible nihility for a while, and maybe, just maybe, jump into the tier 0 category down the line when she outscales her other supports. And that's the video. I don't really have too much else to say for Cipher, besides she's gonna be in a very healthy spot and will have a lot of room to grow. I am pretty curious to see what the fake characters will have to offer, and you better bet I'll cover it eventually. Currently, I do have quite a few video ideas and some incomplete scripts ready to go, so perhaps more videos soon enough. But besides that, thanks for watching and peace!